introduce you is going to be our next speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, he is a tech news buff and he is always on a lookout on how technology can be used in education to equip the students for future. He is an Apple distinguished educator and a Google certified innovator. He took on various roles and served as an advisory board member at Apple South Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, Honorary Secretary in Mobile Alliances and a Google Educator Group Singapore leader. He is currently the head of educational technology at the School of Science and Technology, Singapore. Let's go ahead and welcome him on board.
Hi everyone. Welcome to my presentation on education in the post-COVID era. The things that I share will be kind of similar to what is happening in the case of Singapore. Therefore, I actually subtitle it as a glimpse into the Singapore's approach of what this education in the post-COVID era is all about. Okay. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Aurelius. I'm presently the head of educational technology in Science and Technology School in Singapore. So I'm going to share with you the agenda of my presentation today. I'll be going through the background of the events thus far, what has been happening in the context of the world. And of course, I will briefly touch on what do we need to do to future-proof our curriculum. And of course, how do we go about the pedagogy that we should be using? And of course, looking at what we can do for the case of staff, getting our staff ready in schools to really prepare ourselves for the post-COVID aspect. And of course, hopefully I can answer some of your questions in a short discussion or Q&A section. And the first thing that I want to talk about, the background, events thus far. I think one of the key things that we have been realizing in the case of education and the world is that there's this up and coming, what is being known as the fourth industrial revolution. So when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, that is something that is very much a precursor to what is happening in COVID, and therefore it does impact what is happening during COVID and even after COVID. So the fourth industrial revolution, we all know the first industrial revolution is basically about steam engineering, whereby we had the invention of the steam engines. The second industrial revolution, we are talking about basically the assembly line, the mass production. And the industrial revolution is where we talk about using of technology, the computing, the internet. And of course, the fourth industrial revolution is basically our cyber physical system, our Internet of Things. There's this so-called blending of technology, the augmented reality, and the actual world itself. So why I need to talk about the fourth industrial revolution? Because it has some impact to what is happening in the case of COVID, and it does have an impact to what is happening post-COVID. So when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, according to the World Economic Forum, the largest beneficiaries of innovation tend to be those intellectual and physical capital providers. So when we talk about all these, we're talking about innovators, shareholders, and investors. They account for the rising gap in between those who are dependent on capital versus those people who are just labor-intensive economies. So when we talk about fourth industrial revolution, technology is one of the main reasons why income has stagnated for some countries, and of course, for other countries, there is a huge boom. And therefore, when we talk about this fourth industrial revolution, we do know that it impacted many countries in that during this COVID period time, during this period of COVID, countries that are very much labor intensive, very much into manufacturing, they do suffer more than the companies and economies that are very much involved in those high tech industries. So we see that if you are a country that actually that is very much involved in the pharmaceutical production, then of course we know that COVID in this case have brought about a boom to your economy or to your company or to your job or to your family. But in many of those cases whereby the people that are very much dependent on even like tourism during this COVID period, we see that there is a great impact or huge impact to these economies, and therefore it does affect the schools, it does affect the students attending the schools. But knowing that background, we need to know that there is this need to know what will the future of jobs be like. So without further ado, I'm going to quickly play a video so that you could understand this background before we talk about how COVID further aggravated the whole process.
COVID-19 is one of the biggest crises of our time. It has impacted every single one of us, shaken our social systems, and disrupted every sector of our economies. The automation of work, combined with the global recession, led workers to lose their jobs at an accelerated pace compared to previous years. And this trend is expected to continue. The ongoing shift in the division of labor between humans, machines, and algorithms might displace 85 million jobs worldwide in the next 5 years, while 97 million new roles, ones that are more adapted to this new task distribution, may emerge. By 2025, companies expect to displace roughly 6% of their total workforce. 1 in 2 workers will need reskilling, and those remaining in their current roles will need to update 40% of their skill set to adapt to the changing labor market. There is a way to collectively benefit from these challenging times. Decades of research have shown that the most valuable asset of any economy or company is its human capital. Around the globe, companies are already experiencing a shortage in relevant skills for future roles and are investing in reskilling and upskilling their workforce. By 2025, organizations say they will train over 70% of their employees to ensure they can smoothly transition into the jobs of tomorrow. These include DevOps engineers, artificial intelligence specialists, digital marketing managers, talent acquisition specialists, and customer success specialists. It will take on average between 2 weeks and 5 months for workers to pick up new skills, allowing them to move into these new roles. But data shows they won't need to have the perfect skill set to start transitioning. While 2/3 of employers expect to get a return on investment in employees' reskilling programs within just 1 year, governments will also need to step in to update and fund education and training systems and to ensure displaced workers have adequate safety nets. With purposeful leadership and collaboration, we can turn this global crisis into a unique opportunity to transition into a future of jobs that is inclusive, fair, and sustainable.
Okay, so in order to meet what is to come, when we talk about the post-COVID, we are saying that the curriculum that we need to plan in schools, we need to really be very much future-oriented. And what I'm going to share with you next is nothing special, but it's something that we have been talking about in schools, and we need to further emphasize that this must be done. And of course, what we are talking about is very much of the STEAM, the aspect of science, technology, engineering, the aesthetics or arts or math. These are the few aspects that all schools need to really look at it. But when we talk about the curriculum, when we talk about this whole aspect, of course, there is a greater emphasis that we need to look at in the case of technology. When we talk about the whole aspect of technology, we are talking about programming as really very much the key drivers of what is to come. So when we talk about preparing our curriculum, we need to look at STEAM as schools. We need to look at STEAM. We need to look at the technology. And of course, the other part is very much on the innovation. So it's not just the World Economic Forum that's focusing on this whole aspect. Even in UNESCO, we see that UNESCO is also pushing very hard for schools all over the world to really beef up on our understanding of students' preparation in this aspect of STEAM. So when we talk about this new normal, okay, this summary video that you can look at.
As our societies evolve, so do our education systems. But what does the future of education look like? To answer this question and understand how traditional models are evolving, we looked at emerging features that may become the new normal in education systems around the world. What did we see? Traditionally, in education systems, decisions are made by a select group of people, and everyone has a distinct role. Students learn by listening to their teachers, teachers teach, and principals manage the schools. The curriculum is linear and standardized. Academic performance is prioritized, and students are assessed through standardized tests. How is this changing? Education systems embodying the new normal are part of a larger ecosystem where decision-making and responsibilities are shared among a wide group of stakeholders, and students are active participants in their own learning. In these schools, the learning process and student well-being are also valued in addition to academic performance. There is a recognition that students come from different backgrounds and learn in different ways. Learning happens in a non-linear process with different types of assessments used for different purposes. These schools are monitored no longer just to ensure accountability, but also to encourage frequent feedback at all levels to continually improve the education system. The future, by definition, is unpredictable, but by developing responsive education systems, we can help our children adapt to, thrive in, and even shape whatever the future holds. To find out how you can help too, visit our website.
So what I've just played is a video by OECD, and of course it brings across these aspects that we are looking at in terms of what we meant by pedagogy. How do we address disparities among students? So if you actually realize from the video, it has been mentioned that learning is no longer the typical linear form, whereby the assessment is the typical way of just memorizing and just answering for the exams, the standardized tests that we are talking about. So in order to solve such an aspect, the two things that I want to bring across, and I hope that it will be a takeaway for everyone, is the aspect of blended learning and differentiation. Okay, because we now know that with COVID, that has happened in various economies, in various countries. Some of these cases, we see that the students have actually stopped attending school, and many of them has gone to the extent that they have started working. So how do we go about bringing students back to schools? How to get them to stop working, because knowing that the family need the income. So how do we go about bringing them in? These are some of the things that schools will need to look into. And when they come into school, we have to look at how to differentiate, because now the disparity between each student has become more different. Each one of them have different exposure to where they have been during the past few years. And of course, when they come to school, when we talk about the different points that they have grown, some of them might have better knowledge, some of them have less. So how are we going to make everyone sit through the same lesson, understand and hearing the same thing, is something that we need to look at addressing in school. So therefore, we are talking about differentiation. And of course, I will not go deep on the differentiation or differentiating instructions principles over here, I believe every one of us do have some idea, or if not, you can go look up on differentiated instructions, and so that we can cater to the huge mix of students who are coming to school after COVID. Now, the other aspect that we need to look at is the aspect of blended learning. So what I'm going to share next is basically from MIT, to understand that blended learning is all the more required and all the more important in this day and age. In many of the schools, economists that have coped with the whole aspect of COVID, we see that there is a lot of online learning. We have seen a lot of flipped classroom. We have seen a lot of cases where students are attending classes on Zoom or on various other platforms like Microsoft Teams or Google Meet. So we have seen that students are getting more accustomed to learning online as opposed to face-to-face. In fact, some students have already started to prefer staying at home, learning at home at their own pace, because some of the lessons are recorded, versus going to school. So how do we bring them back to school? I think the only way that we can actually go about doing so is to bring in the whole aspect of blended learning. We can no longer depend on the old traditional approach of just learning face-to-face. And we do know that if we're going to have learning taking place just virtually, there are certain limitations that schools will have difficulty in addressing, because when students learn virtually, the whole aspect of not just the cognitive, but the social aspect of the students will also be affected. So therefore, when we talk about learning, the best approach is to look at blended learning. And earlier on, I said that some of these things that I share could be glimpses of what is happening in the case of Singapore. So to bring across, blended learning is something that the Singapore is looking at, and we are actually doing, and we would encourage people to try the whole aspect of blended learning. It will make it easier for students to return back to school, knowing that there is this whole aspect of blended learning. So when we talk about blended learning, there is this advantage whereby, when we talk about there's greater personalization, because students could learn things at their own pace, but yet, on the other hand, they could actually go about meeting up with teachers to go about learning in greater depth. And of course, to make that happen, we are talking about staff. Okay, we need to find the right staff, the right people for us, for the schools to really cater. And of course, we have seen that in the case of the Great Resignation, okay, the big quit, the Great Reshuffle. We have seen that in many of these cases, people have already, or staff choose to work from home rather than in school. So how do we solve all this? Even in Google, they are telling employees in the Bay Area that please come back to work. So how do we do that? I think as schools, we will need to reimagine how and where work will get done. Understanding the blended learning will also allow us to have our staff have this aspect of remote working for some of the blended learning aspect, whereby we talk about virtual. And of course, how do we attract and retain talent, knowing that many of the people have gone through the Great Resignation, or even the case of lying flat in China, whereby people choose not to work anymore. After going through COVID, they ask what are the greater purposes and meaning of life. So when we want to attract and retain talent in our schools, we need to understand that there needs to be greater flexibility moving on for all schools. And of course, to make things work better, we need to maintain the school culture and trust. And again, all these are adapted from PricewaterhouseCoopers. These are not my ideas of getting the right people, but these are ideas from PwC. And if we could adapt them well, we could actually find the right group of people to cater to our students for this post-COVID kind of scenario. And of course, without further ado, I think we want to have some time for questions and answers. So if you have any questions, maybe you would like to type it out, and then I could answer some of them. education delivery to go, okay, the question is, can education delivery fully go digitalized in the future? What would be the pros and cons of it? I think it is difficult to really go fully digitalized because there is still this other aspect of having the building up of the social aspect, because no matter what, we are still a society. So there is a need for us to have that enculturation to prepare everyone to work together. So we may go digitalized, but the face-to-face is still very much needed. The pros of it is that now we are able to cater to more people at different paces, as opposed to the one size fit all a factory kind of approach in the past. Yeah. So thank you everyone. For if there are other questions, you can leave it there. I will address your questions later on. Yeah.
Thank you. We are offline now.
Thank you so much for such an interesting session. It was a privilege to have you with us.